Okay, welcome to the Thoughts and Color podcast. I'm gonna go by Black Artist because that feels right for right now. Um, I want to start out by talking about and really shedding light on Shirley Raines. So Shirley Raines passed, or we learned of her passing yesterday, which would be Wednesday. I forget the date. Shirley Raines ran the Beauty to the Streets nonprofit, and she fed, clothed, was so pivotal in the community of Skid Row, the homeless community in Skid Row, which is where I started to follow her. She had been giving out meals, clothes, makeup. She talks a lot about her story, and I'm so glad that that's been centered a lot recently. Unfortunately, in her passing, the highlighting of her work. She recently, I had followed her recently moving to Vegas. Because she also recognized the need in Vegas with the homeless population there, and she was dealing with her own trials and tribulations, but she stuck to it, she kept to it, and she was someone who was always in the street. When you talk about movement, when you talk about doing things for people and giving them to the people, she was the epitome of that. Right? When we talk about things like movement, we talk about things like liberation, we talk about things about community and authenticity. I think she really is the epitome and the embodiment of what that looks like. And she did it in her own way. I followed her a lot. And so the way that she would go about it, never really changing herself, how she presented, how she spoke to people, always 100% staying herself, never positioning herself as someone who was perfect, never positioning herself as if she was someone who was better than anybody else. Her approach to supporting the folks that she was supporting was in such a humane way, and really always centering the humanity in people that are often forgotten, like the homeless population. As somebody who lives in New York, even on my walk over here, a lot of times we get in the habit of, and honestly, sometimes it is for our own, or what we call our own, it could be our mental health or just time structure or whatever it is, how we situate it. We often kind of shut a lot of things off, and that is something that oftentimes becomes a part of the habit of the day-to-day. And she made it her life's work to constantly center those folks and constantly make sure that they knew that they were never forgotten and that we didn't forget them, and that we had opportunities to support her work. And she did it day in and day out. She cooked. I really enjoyed her cooking video. She recently did one on how to make bread pudding, but she made it with like rum. But all of her meals were made with love. She emphasized choice. So often you'll see in her videos where there's this thought of beggars can't be choosers, that often people who are in unfortunate situations kind of have to get in the habit of like, I'll take whatever you can give me. And you're not allowed to ask for more. You're not allowed to have choice. And she really emphasized choice, like you are a person and I'm gonna treat you like a person, I'm gonna acknowledge you like a person, and you deserve to have choice, you deserve to have nice things, you deserve to have a hot meal, you deserve to have somebody acknowledge and care about you, whether that is through food, whether that is acknowledging that you deserve to have choices and have things. And she give whatever she had. And so I really wanna start off by talking about her highlight, and I have to say, when I found out about it, it really it shifted my entire day. It really shifted my entire day because it was such a loss to so many communities. She was a true leader and in service, and you know, it's something that's unexpected, right? I always look forward to her videos, always, and she reminds me that I could be doing more. I think she reminds all of us that all of us could be doing more, and that somebody literally took their lives and centered it around other people, our people particularly I'm in awe of. But it really took a lot out of me, and the first thing I thought about is, wow, well, you know, I can't imagine what her family's going through, but also like this person who was so pivotal in these communities, what are they gonna do? Who is gonna be there for them? And I don't know that there's a way to fill her void and to fill her space. I don't know that there will ever be a way to do that. But I think the legacy that she left a place where we at least have guidance and thought in how to move forward. Like, I saw some videos where people had like grabbed pizzas and were going out. And I believe this was in Vegas. They were going out and giving pizza because they knew she wasn't going to be there because of her passing. There isn't a lot that was said about it. Definitely unexpected. I know she recently had an incident, and then I followed that, where she was drugged and she is not sure how she was, and I imagine it was through some type of transaction or interaction where she was drugged and had lost track of time for a couple of days. Like, when she came back, she was, explaining why she had been absent. She's very active on social media, which is how all of us know her. I found her on TikTok and I followed her more so on Instagram back when she was in Skid Row. And she had, Mercedes and different people that she really helped, who also I think about. And so it's been a lot to really think about what those communities will look like without her. I know she has an amazing team, and so I'm sure that they're pick. As a matter of fact, I checked their Instagram. I checked her Instagram because they, I guess, have access to it, and so she had already had like the candies set to bag to give out. She's constantly, if you ever see her, she's always going to Costco. She's always in the store. She knew those folks personally. Like, if you ever see her videos, she knew everybody because she was always there. And she had bought the candies and the things, I'm guessing, to pass out at some point, and she did not get the chance to. And so they actually showed videos of them packing them and saying that, of course, that's exactly what she would want them to do. And so they were packing all the things that she had bought. And so I'm very confident that her team will keep her legacy alive, her family, her friends, and people that she made huge impact on. I know Lizzo did some videos and had done a lot to support with clothing in terms of her Yiddy brand. So I'm very confident with the impact that she's made, that there's a lot of people that are inspired by her, that were inspired by her, that will be inspired by her. If they didn't know about her then, they know about her now, that will absolutely push it forward. And so I'm very confident and very happy to see that, and really hope that that doesn't fade. I think she actually did a couple of visits in New York as well. She did come out to New York, I think at least 2 or 3 times, and did some work here. The other thing is, I was on Instagram this morning because, again, her page was live. There is no context as of now on what happened to her. They just know that I think her daughter found her unconscious after doing a wellness check. Like, she was trying to get into the house and she couldn't, and ultimately asked that the police come, and they found her unconscious on the side of her bed. So there is no update on like what the cause was, but certainly it's something that was definitely unexpected. When I checked in on my live, and I was going through it this morning, and I just happened to check the live just to see what they were doing, because, as I said, the videos that they were doing in terms of like the bagging, just keeping in tune with what the team was doing. Her daughter was actually on the live, having a very tough time, having a very, very, very tough time. She was, this had just happened yesterday. This is all fresh for her. She was struggling in a way that one can only imagine, and she was kind of going back to just how everything was, and just what prompted her to even visit her mother. I think we all have this fear of, like, and I say this all the time as somebody who is, single and lives by themselves, because I no longer have my doggy, even though my dog couldn't call 911, although he was very smart. I was like, damn, and I had these moments where I say, if something were to happen to me at home, how long would it take before someone would notice? And unfortunately, in capitalism, I think my job would have probably been the first to notice that, and really probably called me to make sure I came in, not necessarily to see if I was okay. Maybe not. But more or less, like, this idea of, like, how long would it take somebody to notice that you're missing, notice something's wrong. And it didn't seem like it was that long for her, but she was talking about just this feeling she had. She was supposed to come in later. She came in that day, and she tried calling her mother. She didn't answer. And ultimately she tried throwing rocks at the window, like different things, and her mother was just not responding. And so she ended up doing a wellness check. But she's going through it, like seeing the body, like processing that her mother's gone. Like, it is a process, and it is a trauma that it is hard to describe. As someone who lost her father unexpectedly and in a way that in itself was very traumatizing. A loss is traumatizing. The way you lose someone can absolutely be an additional trauma. And I had to stop watching because it was bringing up a lot for me, because I don't know exactly what she's going through, but I remember what my mind was. And so out of respect to her, because you're not in your right mind, you're just not, and I can speak to that. And so some of the things that she was saying, because I think there's also family dynamics that always comes up, that came up for myself as well. And so out of respect, there's a lot of things that come up. So I think when I really started to notice she was kind of going through what had happened, I had, kind of respectfully that out, and also being respectful of what was coming up for me. I, in real time, found out about my father's passing, like literally. I won't go into the necessary details now, but having seen him, finding him in the manner that we did, being with him, in his with his body for as long as we were, it is something that I literally have PTSD from. So, and I'm not diagnosing anybody, although I kind of could, but it's something to say that it is something you never get over. It is something that you, it is a level of trauma to grief that is, it's a process. And so I want to be respectful in that, and understanding that her family and friends, people that love her, are going through a lot. And in her very thought and vein, around what it means to be part of a movement, part of something bigger than yourself, and really being the epitome of it, living it truthfully and authentically, and I'll say, for me, such a huge inspiration, and somebody who I really held as a standard. I did a lot of work at nonprofit over a decade, not trying to age myself, but it was a while. It was a good while. And you see such hypocrisy. I mean, the nonprofit world, and my experience in the nonprofit world, but depending on how the next couple months shake out, I can get into some real nitty-gritty details. A lot of times are not authentic in the message that they try to portray in terms of how they help. Service looks different, help looks different. How you actually see the client, how you actually see the person versus seeing the client, because those things are different. How you see a person, how you see a human, how you see a client. All of those things you're going to interact with differently. And so living day to day in an organization that functioned differently, but seeing somebody do the work really made me realize, because, I got my ass kicked a lot because I am a social worker at heart. I say that all the time. I think like a social worker, I talk like a social worker. It's just how I move about the world. It also gets me into trouble. It got me into a lot of trouble. But I think one thing that held true for me to stay true is like, no, there is space to do this work authentically and do it where you are centering the people. People think that nonprofits center people. They do not. They center, I know they're nonprofits or not-for-profits, they center profits. If you worked in nonprofit, everybody knows there's numbers attached to what you do. And numbers is how you get numbers. Numbers is how you get funding. And so there is a way to balance that, but you also have to be clear about what that brings into a space. And so I recognize her ability to really be true to the fundamentals of service. And so it reminded me, no, there's space for this. You can do this authentically. You can do this in a way that is really true to how we should be operating. And so, I look to her to really guide that for myself. And yeah, I got myself in a lot of trouble that I would get into all over again, to be perfectly honest. But I really wanted to open out just, again, saying rest in peace, rest in power. She, dynamic, phenomenal woman, impacted a lot of people. And and just think that she's just left an impact on this world, an imprint on this world, that I only hope that we can continue to make her proud in the efforts that we are able to do moving forward in honor of her legacy. With that, I think when we get to different spaces around what movement and liberation looks like, right? Because that is another conversation in terms of what is happening around protest. Actually, I think there's this Shirley Raines thing really, honestly, it took a lot of my brain space. And so I believe that there is supposed to be like a protest of some sort happening tomorrow. I don't know if it's specific to New York or if it's nationwide. And I hate that I don't know it offhand. But I said to say that I know that's coming up. I know there's been a lot of protests in regards to what is happening with ICE, to what is happening with the enforcement of immigration. I think immigration within itself. I think also with the murdering of U.S. citizens by our own law enforcement, which I think is interesting. I think one of the conversations that's coming up, because I feel like when I say that, people automatically, when I'm having these conversations, they know who I'm talking about, right? Because, you know, these conversations are Alex Peretti and Renee Good. But you have to understand, and I know that this is really, it's just been really interesting, because one of the points that I've put up about this is, when has that not been the case? We say it as if it is a thing that I cannot believe law enforcement are murdering its citizens in protest, right? Murdering its citizens who are sometimes in certain instances unarmed, but are not really posing harm to the people that we're seeing in the videos that we've seen, in terms of the films that we've seen, the videos that we've seen. And I always ask the question, and it's, well, if I ask it in certain spaces, I can have a conversation. But when has that never been the case? When has that never been an issue? When has that never been something that has been happening, ongoing, time and time again, tragically? I think it is, to me, it is so irritating to hear that sentiment being expressed, because what it's really saying is white U.S. citizens. Because even the language, when there have been highlighted Black people who died at the hands of police, right? So ICE and police, also law enforcement is law enforcement. So I lump them together. Police, ICE, I don't even know that they go through really a difference of trainings. I don't know the difference in what their trainings look like, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know what kind of educational background. There was this one woman who like literally just like applied to ICE and they just like hired her. So that was actually frightening. I know the police don't have a whole bunch of, like I you know, this is somebody who, you know, went to John Jay. You get like an associate's, you go to the academy, you know, it's not hugely difficult. I think it might be more difficult to be a firefighter, if I'm not mistaken. But I could be wrong on that. I don't know what the training is for ICE. I have no idea. I am gonna 100% imagine that it is far less than NYPD, far less. That is just, again, a lot of them just, a lot of them literally just seem like they signed up for something. It's like, yeah, I'll check it out. And then just was like, this is cool, so I'm just gonna stick with it, you know? And who wouldn't want a sense of power to some extent, but this kind is kind of, it's a little demonic. But I say that to say, I lump all law enforcement kind of in the same way. So I use law enforcement interchangeably, police, ICE. To me, I don't see a difference between ICE and police. They all originate from the slave catcher, right? If you know that. If you don't, and I'm glad that that's been a part of a conversation, right? Police were not police in the way that we see them now and the way that they were developed was essentially to catch slaves that had run away. And also free slave, like, no, you can't be a free slave. Actually, you can be a free slave. You can be a free slave. We've seen that. You can be a free slave. You're not supposed to be a free slave, but you can be a free slave. To catch slaves that had run away, and to also catch free people who had been free, who had gotten their freedom papers. They had also caught them as well, right? That is the origin of the police. So when you look at the origin of law enforcement, the things that you're seeing, again, this is where we talk about history repeats stuff. None of this should surprise you. None of it. The methods to which they go about it, the justification to which they go about it, none of it, right? And so when we're having these conversations, we have law enforcement murdering US citizens. Where were these conversations when it was Black people? Because it was very centered around unarmed Black people being killed by the police. The conversation now shifts to US citizens being killed by law enforcement, being killed by ICE. Two things are happening. One is the change of language depending on the race of the person we're talking about. Because they don't specify white people when they're talking about the more recent happenings of ICE. They refer to them most often as US citizens. That's the problem, right? This is supposed to be for immigrants, which is the second problem, right? This is supposed to be towards immigrants. You're targeting US citizens. They've always been targeting US citizens, which is okay because it was the Black ones, right? And we don't identify Black people often as citizens in the same way, right? And so that language wasn't used. Also, would it be okay if the people that they were killing were immigrants? Whether they were here legally or not, where is the line? And so is it now not okay because the people they're murdering happen to be born in this country or are born in this country? So if they were not born in this country, those deaths would have been okay. I think when people highlight the specificities around these things, I get the one of the purposes is really to explain to people this should be an issue for all, because if we all identify as US citizens, we should all be outraged, right? There's like a unifying piece there. But ultimately, had folks been outraged enough when this was happening, again, more so to people of color and Black people and people of color, maybe we wouldn't have gotten to this place. And this is, again, what the conversations that we have been having for the longest of time about what was going to happen, right? Things are not going to start to move until it impacts people, right? Until things are made uncomfortable. Once you're made uncomfortable, once you're like, oh, this could be me, then the conversation starts to shift. Then people want to do things differently. And so I really do find it very interesting just when I'm hearing certain languages and just the justification, even in what's happening, the fact that people are still finding a way to justify. I honestly, and it's so strange, and I really wonder, I don't wonder, it is very particular in the United States, and I've had this conversation plenty of times with, other people. What we do in this country, and of course it's tied to capitalism, is very significant. Like, what you do is so tied to your identity. In the US, and I didn't realize that was not common in other places. Like, well, what do you do for a living? That is very common here. That's not common everywhere else. A lot of other places, it's like, oh yeah, I work a job, but that's not tied to my identity the way it is here. And that is, the US largely depends on capitalism. And capitalism is really, again, tied to class. So whatever you tell me, that is how I'm gonna assess you as a person. Right, that's really a huge piece of why we use it here. That, again, I don't live anywhere else, so I don't know how they use specifically in those places. But it is very strange the place to which we put law enforcement in a way that they have the capacity to make these judgments, to kill people to the extent that they think is acceptable, to the extent that they feel it's justified, to that we are just supposed to say, you know what, they're law enforcement, they got it, they know. At some point, that we have just kind of decided, yeah, no, they're perfectly, they have the same, I don't even want to say, probably more judging power than actual folks who are judges, than our judicial system. Because judges have the same amount of power one way or another, and actually they don't. Juries do, to a certain extent. Judges enforce sentencing, but a judge can decide whether you get X amount of time, or whether you spend your life in prison, or whether you get the death penalty. Actually, the state also decides that. So even they're more limited. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the judges are more limited to what they can impose on someone than law enforcement, than ICE. And again, these are conversations that are not new. So this is a taste of the medicine that it's like, you know what? Had you been taking your vitamins, maybe this wouldn't be kicking your ass the way that it is now. And now you're trying to down NyQuil, you're trying to down everything now to try to fix it, when honestly you probably should have been doing the necessary things to help to build your immune system. Take your vitamins, make sure that this thing wasn't going to, because we all get sick, things happen. We live in a society where we are living, I don't know that we're living in a society. We're living in something, but we're in a place where things are constantly going to be happening. But when you really look at them, I don't know that they're so as different as we make them, right? Even when we talk about New York City, and I think that this is a huge thing with Mamdani, everyone puts themselves in a position, even when I was talking about in terms of homelessness, if the majority of people get priced out of New York City, we are all at risk of that happening. I don't think people really realize how many people are close to, are at the line of, are a few checks, if not one check away from being in that circumstance. Which is why I really do believe Mamdani, like his commitment to affordable housing was, I think, one of the big, he's also very likable. He's also a very likable person. I'm waiting for the day where he does something that I'm like, there it is. It's just like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. I watch videos of him. I've yet to find something that just makes me highly dislike him. But, he's a human. He will be flawed. He will likely do something. But he ran on that because as a collective, whether we were aware of it or not, we are all in a situation, a little bit farther away from the others, where we can all be priced out of the city. Even people who have lived there, such as myself, our whole lives. And so the closer that comes to you, the closer you realize, oh, I'm getting to this, now it becomes an issue. When really, we can be having this conversation around homelessness in the city right now. It doesn't have to be once a lot more people are priced out of it. Because a lot more people are priced out of it. The conversations that I've had with people around this city and what housing is now versus a couple years ago is astounding. What people are paying in this city is astounding. And so I get that, and I live in an overstimulated city, so I get that, a lot, things can feel like a lot, but it is also being able to realize, as much as living in your own bubble can kind of help you keep your sanity, it can also be the very thing that causes you to get much closer to the thing that you're trying to avoid, because you're living in such a bubble and you're not really realizing or being a part of movements that push things forward in a different direction. I am honestly, and I'm saying this as a Black person, I don't know what to do about the ICE situation. I don't, and I say that because I don't know how to do anything differently than what has been done. And I say do differently in terms of how to respond, which is protest, resistance, discussion, political thought, and ways to move forward. But if we've been doing that and nothing has changed, and I say this again as a Black person, I'm not really sure what it is for me to do that's going to move the needle, right? That it is getting to a point where it is touching a different group of people. So now it's moving the needle on that end, right? In terms of numbers, in terms of class, in terms of race, in terms of privilege. You know, I think even, you know, the fact that they put out, and I'm not really sure why, because I don't really know what Renee Good did for a living. I cannot remember. I don't know if they shared it or not. One of the first things you learn about Alex Reddy, oh, he's an ICU nurse. Okay. And so there's a significance to that. There's a reason why they shared that, right? That's very strange that I don't know that they didn't share it, or maybe it's unknown what she did. I know her partner, I think, was a doctor. I might be messing that up as well. But I don't know. And I think a lot of the conversation is this expectation on how Black people are supposed to respond. And, you know, Black people have been having to respond to their own brutality. I'm not sure how to respond any differently. I don't know that Black people necessarily are doing anything different than they've historically done. Because again, when we talk about the inspiration and the foundation of resistance comes from Black people. I don't really know how many more protests, how many more, and of course as a people, that is something that is in us to do. We get that from our ancestors. But I'm not sure, we've been doing it for decades, even rebellions, we're not even talking about even, you know, back then, in revolts, but like, what is it that you don't think that Black people as a people get tired? That sometimes it's like, you know what, let's tag some other folks in, and then let's kind of see, and then, you know, maybe we can tag back in when, like, what is it? I really ask that genuinely. What is expected? What is expected? And I don't ask this directly to a person, and these are not conversations that I would have like to an individual to say, because I would never ask an individual that particular question. But this conversation comes up a lot around Black people choosing to step in a particular way. I'm not really sure. When people say that, I don't know what they mean. When they're asking Black people to get involved, I really don't know what that means. You're asking us to do what? To protest law enforcement killing U.S. citizens. We have been doing that for decades. For decades. I'm not like, what is it? Is it we're not specific enough? Like, I'm really, when people say that, because also the other conversation is, you know, Black people are having amongst each other is whether we should be doing something or not doing something. We're having the same conversation. It's just about a different set of people. And I think that's what people fail to realize. The conversation is almost exactly the same. We're just talking about different people. And depending on the person that you're talking about is going to determine the level of outrage that you see. And so to me, it is infuriating to hear these conversations around what we should be doing when we have never stopped not doing, when we have never stopped protesting, when we have never stopped having these conversations, we have never stopped resisting the ways to which law enforcement are just allowed to run amok, honestly, and do whatever it is that they would like to do. We have watched people die on camera before. This is not new. There have been many movements birthed from that. The conversation now becomes, who is it that this is going to impact, where the power systems are actually going to start to be concerned, right? Because when it's Black people, they see that, okay, there's some resistance, there's some protest, but there's not going to be a change to the structure. There's not going to be a change to the power systems. Nothing's actually going to structurally change in terms of how power, how people move against power, or how power moves within itself. But now, right, when people are talking about gun ownership, protecting themselves, bearing arms, right? We want to go back to our U.S. documents. When that starts to be heavy in conversation, Well, now the power system says, well, now they're starting to actually pay attention to those documents and actually think about like, oh yeah, that was birthed from also thinking about needing to protect yourself from the government. We kind of forget that as a thing too. And so that, and I also, and I thought that this was very interesting because this came up with the I don't even want to say the resurgence. I'm saying more so front facing of the Black Panther Party, and this is with someone named Paul Birdsong, which is the person that I saw, and that was, he was in, was it, I know he's from Philadelphia. I can't remember the first video where he was that I saw him, but he had a big ass rifle across his chest, and it's just confidently speaking, and I just remember, and I will say, he is a bit lighter skinned. And that matters, right? When we talk about context of colorism and things, and now he's still a black man. I'm not saying that there's, but I do think that they would be different if his shade was a couple of shades darker and he was holding that gun like that. I will say that. But it was something about seeing him speak the way that he was speaking and have a comfort with the gun in which he did, and really had no qualms about understanding that he had a right to defend himself and would do it if he needed to. That I was joyed by, I felt liberated by. I was like, you're not allowed to carry or conceal a gun in New York, as far as I know. I don't think that's changed. I don't think it's gonna change. But that made me feel comfortable, and I automatically went from feeling like joyful to like, oh no, this has got to be making a bunch of other people extremely uncomfortable. Extremely uncomfortable. I said, there is no way I feel joy and comfort, and that there isn't a whole nother group of people that are feeling extreme discomfort, if not worry. And this conversation has come up a lot, right? Whether Black people should be carrying, and I do, right? And then the ways people were reflecting on how they make that difficult, right? Through felonies, through voting, and through gun ownership, right? In the different ways to which they try to limit that. Because what would happen if every Black person was able to carry a gun? Oh, I think that's something that definitely keeps them up at night. And that conversation comes up, and when the Black Panther Party, and I think it's very interesting, when I began to do research on my own, the complete focus of the Black Panther Party as a militia and not the epicenter of really socialism and Black liberation and socialism. That was really the base of the Black Panther Party. I won't go on that whole thing there, but that really is the base. But the focus became on how the Black Panther Party, it was a Black Panther Party of self-defense, right? There are different levels of self-defense and liberation, right? Protection is one. So guns were a part of that. I think that conversation is making people increasingly uncomfortable. This resurgence around the idea of the Black Panther Party, I think it's interesting timing. I think the person who did the video lives in Pennsylvania, where I think you are allowed to own a gun. I think you have to conceal. Actually, I don't know. He had it. I don't know. He had it across his chest. I don't know too much about the law, but I'm gonna assume it, if he's a Black man walking around with that gun, he was allowed to walk around and carry that gun. I'm sure he had it legally, but there's different states that allow different things in terms of how you're able to brandish it. I had a friend. She invited me out to Utah. Utah's an interesting place. Every time I go, I'm like, oh, I can move here. And I'm like, no, I can't. It's a beautiful place to visit. It's a nice place to get away from the city. Everywhere you look, there's like mountains and shit. And I'm like, wow, it literally gives Lifetime movie. Like literally in a way that's very, very interesting. Definitely interesting being a Black person in Utah, I'll say that. But very scenic, very nice place to go hike in. Definitely recommend it. But we went to, oh my God, who was it? I think it was Joe Coy. We went to go see comedian Joe Coy. And so I go with her friends who I've met before, and I became like their favorite person. Of course I did. I made myself that. I was the only Black person in the group. That doesn't really matter to the story. I just want you to have an idea of what the makeup was there. But she sat me between her and the husband of one of her other friends. So all of her other friends were married. So I think it was like 3 couples, me and then her. And they patted us down. They patted us down. I think we went through metal detectors, so we sat down. I sit down, I see that the person to my left has a gun on his hip. Now, mind you, we all got searched coming in here. He had a gun on his hip. And as a New Yorker, I'm looking around like, in my mind, how the fuck did he get that in? Like what y'all got going on in Utah? None of this is registering in my mind that you could just bring a gun into a theater. Right? This is a performer, this is an entertainer that's here. It like nothing in my, so then I'm thinking, because I'm not that invested in their lives, well, maybe he's like a police officer. I literally did not know. And 2 things happened. The first thing, I was nervous. I'm like, what if he has a bad day? What if he's just like, this guy isn't funny? Like, what if he gets offended? Like, I don't know what this man's gonna do. He has a fucking gun on his hip. Like, how am I to know how is he's gonna respond and what, Then the second thought I had, this was the second thought that I had right after that one, was like, damn, if somebody else was having a really bad day and started letting off shots in this bitch, I know the person to my left to me is also carrying. So how much, I don't know anybody else, but I know the person to the left of me is carrying. So how much is, if another person unfortunately did something, how much impact is that person gonna have if there are other people who are carrying? Right? And it was very odd as somebody who did not, I don't think I've ever seen a gun in person. It is not something you see often because, again, New York is not a open, like it's not a carrying state. I think only police officers are allowed to have guns, if I'm not mistaken. So that's not common. In other places, it is. And so it was, and I asked her, I said, he had a gun on his hip. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, well, what does he do? She's like, no, I want you to guess about what he does. I was like, fuck, I don't know. He's like a fucking police chief. He's like, no, he's a fucking librarian. He's either a librarian or a, what do you call that? It's like a bioengineer. Honestly, it was a job that didn't require a gun. I'll tell you that. He was a something. I think he might have worked at a library. I think he was a librarian. I wouldn't have pegged him for a librarian, period, but it was a job that did not require a gun, which means he was just holding it. And so that thought of you can't infringe, like someone can't infringe fully on the people in this room because there is retribution, is the same thing that the power system is afraid of. If there's this balance between, if people infringe upon my rights, if people put me in harm's way, if people put me in a situation where they're pointing a gun at me, I have the right to point one back. And when people, as a people, really start to realize that, and it becomes in everyone's interest, because because of who the victims are, it is now in everyone's interest. Well, now the conversation starts to change. And now the narrative starts to change. And now you have Donald Trump, and I had a really good conversation with, now you're speaking about it. Now you want to actually try to, I don't think Donald Trump remembers what he said sentence by sentence. I think when he says a sentence, he forgets the last sentence he said. So I don't even really think he remembers the things he said. But the narrative is starting to shift in terms of how he's making it seem like he's trying to address the situation that's happening with ICE because of what they are worried is going to happen. That actual retribution could happen. Because it has not happened historically, as I said, because of who it's been happening to. And so I lead, with resistance, as I will till I'm up out of here, in regards to in the ways that this country in the many ways this country operates. I'm always just very interested sometimes in terms of what it takes to push people to a place of action. It's really disheartening and it's really saddening, and a loss of life is a loss of life. And in this country, right, it should all be created equal. But we see that it isn't. In sidestepping news, since I am talking about governmental stuff, who was I having this conversation with? I cannot remember offhand, but I'm so disconnected. And they were asking me questions about like the whole, who was I having this conversation with? Because I had the conversation more than once, but it was, well, I know who it was. So it was a friend I was having the conversation with, and it came up in conversation, very brief conversation around Nicki Minaj. And honestly, I've been very disconnected from what she's been doing because I honestly think that that woman is unwell. Like I genuinely think something is genuinely wrong, whether it is substances or whether it's mental health or a combination of both. I think she is absolutely unwell. So while I was a little sympathetic initially, I think she's been a fucked up person for a very long time, and I think we've ignored it for a very long time. I think now that it has gotten to a level of it being politicized in a way that cannot be ignored, I think another thing is a lot of rich folks are aligned with things that a lot of people, not surprisingly, don't really think about. If you think that somebody who is rich thinks that they have more in common with you than with somebody like Donald Trump or other rich people and people of power, I think that that requires a little bit of delusion, which I think we all suffer from to a certain extent. But, you know, you can have artists who align with your values, or at least say they align with your values, and recognize you as a people or a consumer and know where to kind of throw their weight. I think what we're seeing is somebody who is, again, dealing with a lot of things, also is dealing with a deep sense of insecurity and is lashing out in different ways and with different people, whether that was Megan Thee Stallion, whether that was Cardi B, but it's definitely dealing with a lot of insecurity and, again, mental health, and I think substances is playing a role with that. I think fear, I think, you know, the deportation piece is very important, but it's strange in terms of how it's playing out. The fact that she thinks that she's even somebody on his radar, I think, is weird. Like, I forget Rihanna is not, I don't really forget, but because she's such a huge pop artist in America, sometimes it escapes me she's not born here. Sometimes it escapes me she's Bayesian, and I don't think she's ever sought to become a U.S. citizen, because why would you need to? But she's not somebody who I would think would align herself with that power dynamic because she's worried, oh, I'll be deported and never be allowed into the country. Well, actually, she can't. She's not a citizen, so I don't think she can get deported. Or she could not be allowed back into the country. I'm sure she has a work visa. There's some visa that can be revoked. There's something that allows her to be able to work in the United States, because that she does do, that can be revoked. I don't know what Nicki Minaj has, because as far as I know, she's been undocumented since she was a child. She was not born here. That is not news. I think it's strange that she's been famous as long as she had, and that was not something that she was worried about until now. At no point, because people like to point this out, that people prior to Donald Trump are really enforcing the immigration rules, but at no point before then was Nicki Minaj worried about her citizenship or getting it revoked. I think that is interesting within itself, that during this administration, she's actually worried about being deported. That's actually something that stands out so much to her, that she is giving up a huge chunk of her fan base, giving up a lot of what she claims to have stood for in order to finagle a citizenship. Something is very odd and strange, to the point where I don't know that it really is best use of my brain power to really have that strong of an opinion on it. You know, Nicki Minaj being a New York artist, there's always a love there, but she can go somewhere. I'm okay. She's done her time. Like, there's a lot of artists that will disappoint you, and she is one. I think it makes me saddened for people who really, really look up to her, because many of them are oppressed people, whether immigrants themselves, Black people, and gay folks, transgender. You know, it's very, I don't know what to make of it. I think I'm still kind of like really, I don't want to understand it, but I'm kind of forced to because so much about it just does not make sense. But people who find refuge in artists like that, right? Somebody who highlights communities that are often in the dark, I think when you lose that, there is a mourning. As a Black woman, it does hurt to see a Black woman take a stance in those kind of ways. It hurts because that was not always her stance. Now you have somebody like a Candace Owens. Candace Owens has been, as far as I've been aware of her, she's been how she is. So she's an easy person to dislike because I've disliked her as long as I've known of her awareness. Nicki Minaj, not as much. When you see somebody kind of go through a transition like that, really has the potential to really bring harm to a community because you lose someone who has a voice that can often look like a form of, can seem like a form of protection. And you also see how flimsy that is in these contexts. She could really be using her voice to talk about a lot of things. And instead she wants to be known as Trump's #1 fan. I don't, we're living, if you would have told me this 10 years ago, that we would be having this kind of conversation, more so about Nicki Minaj, like I'm gonna, this is so interesting, and I'm gonna wrap up with this. I've been seeing a lot of things. I like nostalgia. Nostalgia helps me. And I look at a lot of older things, and it reflects to me a time to which we were in a very similar place not too long ago. I had been rewatching She's Gotta Have It, and I actually put this on my Instagram page. There were things on that show they were making fun of. This was during Trump's first presidency, because again, this is his second term, right? About him deporting people around him, eventually getting to a place where he's deporting U.S. citizens, which has happened, is going to happen, continue to happen, where they were talking about deporting and jailing the homeless. Now, this is meant to be an exaggeration of what was happening at the time during his presidency, of what we thought a Donald Trump presidency before it was happening was going to be, and what the early signs were. And to see these things continue to happen, because again, a period of time, a block of time, Biden's 2 terms in between have happened. So we kind of forget how much has taken place, and how similarly, how we've literally done a loop-de-loop, how we've literally gone from one place, come all the way up this 360 that everybody talks about, and come right back to the same place. I recently also looked at a protest, because I'm getting prepared for a workshop that I attended. It was the Protect Our Sisters protest. It was down by City Hall, and this was in response to the death of Breonna Taylor at the time, Tatiana Jefferson, and Tatiana Jefferson, Sandra Bland. So all of those folks, all of the loss of Black women that was happening at the time. And so I had recorded a lot of the, and this was in 2019, so this was before the pandemic, and this was at the time, I think, of, this was definitely during a Donald Trump presidency, because I do believe, yes, he was our president, he was our president during COVID, definitely when COVID hit, and that was like early 2020, I remember that time. I won't even get into why I so absolutely remember that. And so he was referencing him, and I was like, wow, he was president then. And he was highlighting so many things. And one of the things that he pointed out is during that presidency, and during this one, because again, years have passed, but here we are back in the same place. Actually, we didn't have 2 terms of Biden. Biden dropped out the second time. We only had 1 term of Biden. That's why I'm like, why is my time off? I'm thinking of Barack Obama. We had 2 terms of him as vice president, but 1 as president. And so there was only a 4-year difference. So he had said in response to everything, and he's talking about Black people in the march because it is specific to Black people that he's referencing, that during that administration, to response to everything that we as a people have been requesting, the response has been more police. We want better education, we get more police. We want access to jobs, we get more police. We want access to wealth, we get more police. We want access to resources, we get more police. To response to everything that we request, the response is met with more police. And in response to our economy is shit, oh, here, we're gonna give you more law enforcement. We would like to figure out how we can make our immigration system better, more just, more fluid, so that people can go through it, quote unquote, the right way, as if who the fuck are they to dictate what the right way is? But we're just gonna put a whole bunch of more ICE agents, we're gonna put more law enforcement out there, and just like the response to everything is more police, more law enforcement, not actual policies, not actual structure, not actual resources, not actually anything. And that is absolutely specific to this country in terms of how we can say it's the administration. I think that that's also a piece of it. But really, our response to anything when it comes to poor, oppressed people, or anyone who doesn't have power, status, and money, is more police. And I don't think we recognize that. And it wasn't until I saw it back in 2019 and reflected it now in the same ways to which historically it's been done that way, that no one has really talked about how that has been the consistent response, and how we're seeing that response literally undo pause, press play, and being the complete response that we're seeing. And again, I will point, this is a replication, and which is why it was brought up into that particular protest, of how things have been addressed within the Black community. Anytime the Black community asks for something, they get more police. And now we're seeing, when we ask for anything just, what the response is, and likely will continue to be, is more law enforcement. And so again, I asked the question, and this has been my question that I now answer people with when this conversation comes up around, and I don't know why Black people are constantly centered in this, what we should be doing, what is different than what we've always done, and what is going to be different about the response that we have historically getting than what is happening now. And now here's the prize, we all now get to figure out together, because now it's not just a Black thing, it's never really been a Black thing, but now we don't get to pivot it that way. Now we all get to figure this question out. Now what are we all going to do when no one's actually responding to the problem, but just putting a Band-Aid of law enforcement on it? And so maybe this might bring us a little bit closer to answer that question, but I imagine it won't. We'll just be continuing to loop around it again and again, and there'll be something that pivots us to focus on something a little bit different. Again, rest in peace and rest in power to Miss Shirley Raines and the Beauty to the Streets community. I'm at time, right? Yeah. That felt exhausting. I need my, I gotta figure out a way to make sure I have my list. I was all over the place. Huh? Yes, you are. So how it's sent